Hello, and welcome to Back Through the Lens, where two film school friends talk about movies through the haze of nostalgia. The good, the bad, and the ones that aren't quite how we remember them. I'm your host, Rachel, and with me is my co-host, Joe. Today's movie is Stand By Me.
What can be better than adolescence on summer break? No school, no work, and the freedom to do what you want with who you want. It's also when we physically, emotionally, and socially have begun the slow slip into adulthood. It's a time where foundations of friendships are laid, relationships are strengthened and tested. Maybe it's on the baseball diamond or in the Saturday afternoon detention, or shopping at the mall with your friends. Maybe it's a walk through the woods to see a dead body. Whatever the situation for you and your friends, cherish the moments while you're in them, because before you know it, you'll be looking back at them through the haze of nostalgia.
So today we're talking about Stand By Me, directed by Rob Reiner, released August 22nd, 1986, rated R, based on the novella The Body by Stephen King.
This maybe marks, I think, the second time there's been a movie that we've reviewed based off a book that I've actually read. This and Wizard of Oz.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, everything else, it's just still on my wanted list.
I've never read this. I was actually thinking about Stephen King books and Stephen King movie adaptations, obviously, while watching this. And I think I've only read Carrie and maybe The Green Mile.
Okay.
I'm not a big Stephen King person. I don't know what it is. I just haven't been able to get into his books as much. But I've seen Carrie and The Shining and Misery and this.
I hope.
Yeah. No surprise.
Uh-oh.
We're going to talk about a movie I haven't watched yet. See how it goes. And I've seen The Green Mile and Shawshank. Definitely more the Stephen King movies.
Those are like probably the better of all the adaptations, so I think you can stop.
Oh, I can stop? Okay.
Yeah, but some of them aren't so great. There are just plenty of fans that might say otherwise, but realistically, I think you've seen the good ones.
Okay. We can go with that. That's fine. I think Stephen King would have a different opinion.
I feel like they pay him to say every movie that is adapted from his works are good, because he'll be all over social media saying like, "Oh, I saw a cut of this. This is great," and then I go watch him like, "What? Come on, this is nothing like your book. What are you doing?"
See, I was talking about the opposite, where we will get into it a bit later in our discussion, but he doesn't really seem to like many of his adaptations or the film adaptations of his books. Maybe he likes the more recent ones, which obviously have not gone down as classics the same way things like The Shining have. But
maybe he's getting softer in his old age.
He famously hated the movie version of The Shining.
Oh, yes. I'm very well aware of that one.
Yeah,
so much so they had to make another one.
Yeah. And he was like, "This is great."
Yeah.
Everyone was like, I'm curious like what Stephen King books you've read, because I feel like you're a pretty big reader and definitely a Stephen King fan.
Yeah, I've got into Stephen King kind of early. I graduated from my R.L. Stine Goosebumps when I was a kid to Stephen King. Like I kind of jumped. Partly because my mom and my uncle were also fans, and then always a fan of horror movies, started watching those. I think I've seen just about every adaptation before I've read them, because it's quicker to watch a 2-hour movie than read a 10,000 page Stephen King book.
Yeah.
So I thought I was impressed with myself, thinking I read like a good amount of his, like 30 plus. And then I counted all the ones I haven't read. I'm like, oh, it's like only half of what, because he won't stop writing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I promise you when he dies, it'll be like 50 more books they find in his like office somewhere.
I forgot that at the very beginning of the pandemic, when everything shut down, my husband ordered a DVD copy of the miniseries of The Stand.
Ooh.
The original one, not the one that they recently remade. So obviously that was a great thing to watch during the pandemic when no one knew what was going on and we were all kind of like confused and scared. I had never read it or seen it. I know a lot of people that love that story. Like The Stand is one of their favorite books. I wouldn't mind reading it sometime, but it's just so long. I don't know. I have trouble getting into Stephen King. So it's never something that I'm really like itching to get into. My husband really wanted me to read I can't think of what's The Gunslinger?
The Dark Tower
The
series.
Dark Tower. Yeah, I wanted to say His Dark Materials. I'm like, that's not it.
Nope.
And then I wanted to say Man in the High Tower, and that's not it.
Nope, still not it. Yep.
None of it's right.
None of this is it.
Yeah, and I think I read one of them, and then I don't know. I don't know.
Listen, there's lots of other books out there, so you're not hurting my feelings.
There are lots of other books out there. That's my problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Half of them are written by Stephen King, though, so you know. Not all Stephen King stories are scary. I would say, arguably, by this point in his career, there's probably a lot less scary ones, or at least ones I find less scary than, like, I don't know, maybe the first decade of his very long career. And as an example, this movie that's based off The Body.
That is true. And I've thought about this too. And obviously, I've seen Shawshank, and well, The Green Mile had like supernatural elements, kind of,
but not scary.
I don't think of it as scary. And obviously, this one.
Well, oddly enough, you mentioned Shawshank. That is from the same book The Body is in. It's like 4 novellas.
Okay. Do we want to talk about our movie?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. This is not a book podcast.
I was just going to say, do you want to turn this into a book podcast instead?
If you've never read The Body or have seen Stand By Me, it all starts with, you guys want to see a dead body? Is the question that puts the 4 friends on a quest to become local heroes and escape their lackluster home lives. Along the way, the boys are tested through various trials, tribulations, and misadventures. But when the idea of finding the body gets into the heads of the older boys, our would-be heroes are in a race they aren't even aware of.
Yeah, I don't remember the first time I saw this exactly, but I know I was a teenager. I was slightly older than the boys in the movie. Again, probably just going through trying to see all these movies that I had heard were good that hadn't been on my radar before. And I do remember loving it the first time I saw it. But also, which we will discuss, seeing it now as an adult, as a parent, it was such a different experience.
I feel like, or at least I want to say, I was about the age of the boys in this film, so 12-ish. I don't fully remember. I've seen the movie lots of times. It's, like I mentioned earlier, one of the better adaptations. And as I mentioned last season with Boys in the Hood, I am a fan of a good coming of age story. And I'm gonna maybe partly give some credit to Stephen King, because besides being known as like the master of horror, he does coming of age very well.
Yeah, that's something that really struck me rewatching it this time, was that obviously this isn't in a time period that either of us were around for. And also you could argue like our childhoods were so different because of technology. And we talk a lot on this podcast about how different some of these movie plots would be if cell phones existed or the internet, and how certain things wouldn't have happened or whatever. But I really feel like the core of this story is universal. Despite when it was set, you still, despite all the technology and whatever kids have at their hands now, my son is still running around outside with a group of boys his age. Yes, they will come in and want to watch TV or play a video game, but this is still such a universal story, just a group of boys growing up together.
Yeah, I don't think one point during this rewatch I fell out of the time frame, whatever you want to call it, and thought like, oh, if they had a cell phone, they can just call and do this. I think I just get pulled in, and someone who didn't grow up in 1959, it feels like super authentic. And I think King writes a lot from his memories, his experiences, and things like that. The whole beginning with the treehouse, I don't want to say it's word for word, but like the dialogue is pretty spot on from what I remember. The adaptation was very well done, and I believe it got nominated for an Oscar, but I'm sure we'll probably talk about that later as well.
Okay, so getting into our background a little bit before we get into our main plot. From what I understand from my research, this book fell into the hands of a screenwriting team, and they're the ones that kind of went to Stephen King and were like, please let us adapt this. Like, we love the story. We promise we'll do a good job. The whole thing. Stephen King was paid, I believe, $100,000 and 10% of profits.
Damn.
Not as good as Michael Crichton's deal,
No, but
but still.
yeah, it's still. Also, at this point, though, this is 86. Oh, that's when it
Hmm.
came out.
Hmm.
Let's say, maybe a couple years prior to that, he's already had like a good amount of movie book deals. So I think he's probably already starting to sit pretty.
Oh, for sure. The director that was originally attached to this is Adrian Lin. He's probably best known for movies like Fatal Attraction and Unfaithful. Just not really the kind of filmography that I could see Stand By Me really fitting in with personally. However, he was directing 9.5 weeks and that ran over. And from all accounts, he was completely exhausted and he had promised himself he wouldn't go right into another project after 9.5 weeks. So this is when producers approached Rob Reiner. I couldn't really find anything about why Rob Reiner specifically. This is Spinal Tap was a success at the time. He was known a little bit from that, but he had only directed that and one other movie. So I don't know if he was almost like an easy get for them because his career as a director was just starting.
Yeah, that is interesting. He did like the two movies. I don't even know what the second one is.
We will mention it later because it's John Cusack was in it.
Oh,
And
okay,
that's
okay.
why John Cusack has that little part in this movie.
I think that to your point, yeah, maybe Rob Reiner was an easy get. Maybe he was also because of his short little filmography that
Hmm.
he might have been also on the less expensive side, possibly.
That that is my guess as well. My only pushback on that is that he does come from like a famous family. He was already
Mm,
known as an actor because he was in All in the Family when he was younger. His dad is Carl Reiner, who is a comedian, actor, director, and writer. Maybe most notably, he created The Dick Van Dyke Show. But Rob Reiner also had a strained relationship with his father, again, Carl Reiner, who was famous in his own right. I was surprised at that. I did not, I guess I don't know that much about their family, but I didn't realize that he felt this way. Rob Reiner felt a kinship with the characters of the young boys in this movie because he was actually 12 years old in 1959, as was Stephen King. I think Stephen King said this was, I don't know if his most autobiographical or just that it was autobiographical.
yeah, I feel he sneaks a lot of himself in a lot of his characters. Gordy is a writer. A lot of his main characters are writers or English teachers
Hmm.
or, some other maybe former odd job that he did before he became famous.
Gotcha. Rob Reiner also related to some of these boys having strained relationships with their fathers because his relationship with his father was strained, which was surprising to me. Maybe that's what happens when you grow up with a father who's very famous and busy. But I guess I wasn't thinking of it that way, considering Rob Reiner kind of followed in his dad's footsteps.
Yeah, true.
So now I'm kind of interested in their family dynamics. But and also just movie connections. We had mentioned Rob Reiner briefly when discussing A League of Their Own because he was married to Penny Marshall for a time, and he is the father of Tracy Reiner, who played Betty Spaghetti.
So you mentioned like Rob Reiner seeing the script. Apparently, he reworked the script to make Gordy more of the central focus, so kind of almost like the main character in this little quartet of boys.
Hmm.
He says in the book, Gordy was kind of a dispassionate observer, but once I made Gordy the central focus of the piece, then it made sense to me. The movie was all about the kid who didn't feel good about himself or whose father didn't love him. He also said, and through the experience of going to find the dead body and his friendship with these boys, he began to feel empowered and on to become a very successful writer. He basically became Stephen King.
Oh, well, that answers my question about the autobiographical part of this.
I mean, to be fair, this is like kind of, I guess, Rob Reiner's interpretation of a reworked script. But I mean, yes.
Yeah, probably a fair interpretation. Probably most people's interpretation if they were aware that this was a Stephen King book first.
Yeah. Although I didn't really look into Stephen King's relationship with his father. I don't know what that was like. I know he talks often about his mother.
Mm. Yeah, I'm really curious now, having read all this. What was Stephen King's upbringing like? What was Rob Reiner's upbringing like? I'm so curious about everyone's family dynamics. Like, what led you all to like connect with these really kind of awful stories? uh,
Trauma.
Trauma. Well, right. I mean, yeah. But yeah, speaking of trauma, Rob Reiner also apparently related to Gordy's confused feelings about how the character of Teddy continued to defend his father despite his father abusing him. There's a lot made of the fact that I kind of hate saying that Teddy's father, quote unquote, went crazy, but that's how they put it in the movie. But at some point, he held Teddy's ear to an oven or to a stovetop, and like his ear is obviously burned.
Hmm.
And like everyone in town knows about this, but also it's pretty obvious that his ear is messed up, to be fair.
Yeah.
But Reiner related to this feeling of, Gordy kept trying to figure Teddy out. Like, how could you have such allegiance to your parent who treated you like this? Whereas Gordy has a pretty poor relationship with his own father, and I don't think Gordy thinks too much of him. He certainly wouldn't go out of his way to defend him to like the townspeople.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was there's the physical abuse with Teddy, but then there's the emotional neglect with Gordy.
Yeah, and Reiner apparently related a lot to Gordy's feeling that his father didn't really make time for him, was too busy for him, because I guess that is part of what Rob Reiner's issues with his own father were.
Yeah, like you said too, his dad was a very busy Hollywood writer.
Yeah, I guess. On a lighter note, I got into some of the casting, just some fun stories about how all our boys got cast in their roles. Apparently, they had set on a core group of actors they liked, but they were always kind of shifting to see which boy would be like the best in which role. Wil Wheaton, who's the actor who played Gordy, he almost lost the role completely because he told the casting director he wasn't comfortable crying in movies. But it turned out that an acting coach had told Will that it's okay if you can't cry on camera. They just put like lemon juice and onion in your eyes and make you cry. And as a kid, that sounded terrifying to him. So he wanted to make sure he told the casting directors, like, by the way, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
But after his audition, where he had mentioned this, I don't know if it was agent or someone was like, you have to go back there and tell them you're joking because crying is a big part of this movie.
Right.
Corey Feldman was cast as Teddy Duchamp. Apparently, they were looking at Corey for possibly playing Gordy and possibly playing Chris, but Rob Reiner felt that his real life situation mirrored a lot of what Teddy went through, and he would be a better choice for Teddy. Corey Feldman, which I feel like this has come to light more recently, was really pushed into acting by his parents. There was a lot of abuse, and he will say himself that he had a very troubled upbringing. I have a quote from Rob Reiner from an interview about the making of this movie. When he walked in the doors and I looked in his eyes, I saw pain and anger. And he was the only kid that could play that kind of pain and anger. He subsequently told me some of the things he was going through in his own life. I mean, he was literally just plunked down in Eugene, Oregon, and handed over to a guardian that his parents had never met. So basically, for the filming of the movie, Corey Feldman's parents were not involved, and neither were River Phoenix's parents, who played Chris. Which we'll get into a little bit. Wil Wheaton, who plays Gordy, and Jerry O'Connell, who plays Vern, they had more of maybe a better structured, maybe more conventional family unit, and their parents and sometimes even extended family were with them there on set, and definitely affected each boy's experience.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. And
you have like two of them kind of doing whatever they want.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. Again, we mentioned that Rob Reiner kind of decided which boy fit which character best based on their actual background. And it does seem like, I guess we can call them the bad boys, which would be Teddy and Chris, which I kind of hate because as Chris brings up in the movie, like it's just his family's reputation. He's not necessarily a bad kid. Teddy also just got dealt like a crappy lot in life. He can't help that his father had these mental problems. But it's interesting that the two that struggled the most in real life are the two characters who we see struggle the most too. Jerry O'Connell, cast as Vern, he apparently in his audition felt that he thought he was going to meet Archie Bunker because his parents had told him that Rob Reiner was an actor in All in the Family. So he's like, oh, okay, he was Archie Bunker. He played Meathead, by the way. So when he did go in there for his audition and meet Rob Reiner, he said, you're the guy from Channel 5, because that's the channel that ran the show. But Reiner thought he was like very natural and genuine and just felt like he would fit right in as Vern, which just from that little story, I feel like that is something that Vern would have done.
I can totally see Vern doing that.
Yeah.
Being like super ecstatic and wanting autographs maybe, and just like wanting to hang out and try to meet Archie.
Yeah. But also, like, you think his parents could have maybe clarified which actor he was meeting?
Maybe, I don't know, maybe they assume he knew. I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, you watch All in the Family, I guess, enough to be a fan and know the guy from Channel 5. And I don't know, there's credits and TV shows too. So you had mentioned that a group of screenwriters like read the book and went up to Stephen King and they're like
a team, like a writing team. Mm-hmm.
Writing team. It seems like that was the easy part, right? Like get Stephen King's blessing, give him some money and promise him some more money.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of seemed a little bit like a production nightmare to get it on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
It seems Embassy Pictures, the production company, was sold to Columbian Pictures days before Stand By Me was to begin filming, and they were going to cancel the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they were probably trying to cut some fat, I would assume, if you just bought another company. Who knows?
Yeah, I'm so curious why, when everything was already set to go, they thought that would be the better move.
Right. I mean, at this point, you've already spent money, too. Like, you're just now wasting it.
Well, exactly. And, like, sets were already built. Like, everyone was in Oregon already and ready. So what would the point be, I guess?
I don't know. But it did get canceled. Like, days before filming was supposed to start. And then Norman Lear, he is a legendary TV producer. He did things like, surprise, All in the Family. But also Maude, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, One Day at a Time. And apparently he put up $7.5 million of his own money to get the film made. He also co-owned Embassy, had worked with Rob Reiner and All the Family. Obviously, we mentioned that he was a producer on the show. So, yay, the production was saved. We got our movie, even though some guy had to pay out of his own pocket, which I guess he gets EP credit for that, right?
Yeah, that's what I would think. Also, I would love to have enough money that I could just give my old coworker $7.5 million to make his movie.
I would like enough money just to make my own movie, I guess. But, coworkers too. Why not?
One can dream.
If they have a good idea, if I had the money, I'd support them. So, like I said, the film was saved, but it had no distribution because it was supposed to have been done through Embassy. Everyone passed on it. Paramount, Universal, the brothers, so on and so forth. You know what I'm talking about. WB, Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
I got a quote here from the co-screenwriter, Bruce A. Evans. He says, the consensus was that no one would be interested in a story about 4 12-year-old boys on a railroad track. It was dark. There was not a girl in it, which, pause right there. That's kind of funny, I think.
Usually, what have we seen so far? That Clueless couldn't get made because there were too many girls.
Now this one's not going to get made, potentially, because there was 0 girls.
Right.
Back to the quote, I'm sorry. It was dark. There was not a girl in it. No one knew how to sell it. Of course, what attracted us to it was that it was a coming-of-age story without girls or buying rubbers or first kisses or all that. It was about kids becoming aware of their own mortality.
It does sound incredibly dark when you put it that way.
Yeah, I don't feel like it was dark, though.
No, it doesn't play that way, I feel, when you're watching it. Like, I can completely understand why at this age they'd be curious about like, what does a dead body look like? Like that just sounds like such a little boy thing. But at the same
Hmm.
time, like when you're just saying it like that, like I could imagine when you pitch it, it sounds darker than it plays.
Yeah.
But also watching this movie, you're seeing them do like kind of like dumb, innocent, like adolescent things, you know? So it balances out very nicely, but I guess I could see how their elevator pitch maybe would sound darker than it really is.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the boys wanted to find the body to notify local authorities because he was presumed missing. So they wanted to be heroes. So it wasn't just like, hey, let's go poke it with a stick.
Right. Let's go poke it
Like,
with a stick.
there's a little bit more to it. So I guess, like, yeah, the elevator pitch would be a little darker, but, you know, how it plays out is a little bit opposite of that, I think. Columbia Pictures production head just happened to put on a screener when he was at home sick. He liked it, but apparently his daughter particularly loved it and encouraged him to put it out there and distribute it. So good thing he had a sick day at home, huh?
Good thing he had a sick day. Good thing he had kids who were the right age for it, I guess.
Right.
I also read that in particular his daughters ended up with like a massive crush on River Phoenix.
Seems about right. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, the I don't know, legend of River Phoenix that looms so large over this, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was kind of the heartthrob later on, right?
I believe so. I like obviously I know his name. I know he was, you know, rose to stardom pretty quickly for a young age and then obviously burned out too quickly as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've seen anything else off the top of my head that he was in besides this movie a lot of times.
Yeah, growing up, I feel like he was always this actor I heard a lot about, probably because he died young
Yeah.
and because he had achieved that like heartthrob, like kind of like teen beat status where he'd be the one in like the tear out posters and the teen girls magazines. That's how I always think of it. There are actors like him who I knew of growing up that I had never seen anything they've been in, probably.
Right.
And he looms so large in my mind as some sort of big actor, like a James Dean kind of thing, where for the longest time, you know, I had never seen a movie with James Dean and he only had three, right? But he, the legend of him
Right.
looms so large. And I feel like River Phoenix was that sort of an actor for me. Even, I think the very first time I ever watched this when I was younger, when the credits rolled, I was like, oh, so that's River Phoenix? Like, I don't think I even realized he was
Right.
in it.
Finally, I got one.
Finally, I got one. We'll get into, you know, their later careers and everything in a little bit, but I do think it's really funny now that we're mentioning this sort of like legend of River Phoenix. It's very funny to me that Jerry O'Connell and River Phoenix existed at the same time. Just Jerry O'Connell, the way I know of him, because
Mm-hmm.
he was another one that I didn't recognize Vern as Jerry O'Connell when I went back and watched this as a kid. I knew Jerry O'Connell from like some stuff that had come out more to the time when I was a kid, like Scream 2. I did not realize that was him. And then I was like, wait, Jerry O'Connell existed in the same time frame as River Phoenix? That doesn't sound right.
And Corey Feldman.
And Corey Feldman, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, he looks a lot different in this movie.
Which one?
O'Connell.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. For a second,
Yeah.
I thought you meant Corey Feldman, and I was like, he does not actually.
No, he looks
show.
exactly the same. Yeah,
He looks exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah, no, Jerry O'Connell looks a lot different.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one who thought this.
I think everyone thinks this. He's a little chubby kid in this movie, and then he like took a break, and then he became tall and skinny and had a maybe like the first ever on paper glow up.
Never thought of it that way. As we get into our plot here, my very first note, why Oregon if Stephen King?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because I had forgot that it takes place in Oregon. I just assume Stephen King, it's going to be somewhere Maine, if
Right.
not, somewhere else, but something crazily different. And from what I understand, this is unconfirmed, but some rumors I read that one of the screenwriters misunderstood the reference in the body to Portland and thought it was Portland, Oregon, and not Portland, Maine. And so now it's set in Oregon.
Could you imagine if that's true? Like the
I hope it
biggest
is.
mistake you could make at your job. I don't know. Maybe they weren't as aware of Stephen King's career as we are, but I, have not read many of his books and I even know everything is going to be set in Maine.
Right.
I
Okay.
kind of hope that's not true just because, like, can I be a screenwriter then? Because I wouldn't have made that mistake.
Yeah.
Can I have his job?
It's probably not true. I kind of want it to be. Maybe they just found a location that looked woodsy enough and kind of like Maine, but they could have still called it Maine because it doesn't matter where you shoot. Like, I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. When watching it this time around, I was like, Castle Rock, where now? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, and the weird thing too is that they kept the name of the river that's in Maine.
Yeah.
This town is Brownsville, Oregon, where they filmed. There is a river that runs right by it, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head now, but in the movie it's still the Royal River, which is in Maine, because it features in other Stephen King stories.
Which is another confusing part too, because that's the whole point of like doing Derry and Castle Rock is there's a little bit of history, and a lot of times in these books they'll mention like, oh, that dog from back when, you know what he's talking about, and stuff like that. So if you're gonna take them out of Maine and put them in Oregon and keep the same city name, that's fine. They're in a new state, make believe Castle Rock, Oregon, but then keep the same river name also, which runs through Maine. I don't know. I can't dwell too much on this because we're not going to find our answers. It's not going to make sense to us.
I know. The whole Stephen King universe got weird and layered with this one, I guess.
Or someone just made a geographical mistake.
Yeah. Which is it? Who knows? No way to know.
No way to know. I love that we see a little clubhouse right away. I can't help watching this movie and not think of it as well, just because the first chunk of the book and both movie adaptations all about 12-year-old kids and the connection they have with each other and their friendship. And one is a lot more scarier than the other, but it's hard not to see one without seeing the other, I think, for me at least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that connection to it, so I don't know what I was going to say. I do like just the symbol of a clubhouse. I feel like that's that feels of another time to me, even though that was still obviously a thing when we were growing up. It also, I feel like the idea of a clubhouse or a treehouse is something that always happened in movies, but like not in real life.
Not to the extent. Like it's like it looked like they're in a den. Like they climb up through the ladder and they're in someone's living room and they're playing cards and smoking and drinking. And like, I feel tree houses or clubhouses I've seen in real life were maybe like two pieces of board stapled to a tree. You're like, hope your dad's a good enough carpenter you don't fall out, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Also on this rewatch, it's been a really long time since I've seen it. I was struck at all the smoking, but I guess that is, of the time. I just didn't remember there being so much smoking. This is also one of the reasons I was wondering if this was why it got the R rating, because I was actually thinking about whether or not my kid could watch this with me. And at one point he did come by and ask if he could watch it with me because I had just let him watch Tiny Toons. And I was like, maybe later, like, because I kind of wanted to revisit it myself because I was like, maybe there's something I don't remember that's like really not good. I mean, aside from the dead body, right? I guess in my opinion, it's not so gory that I would necessarily have like a problem with him seeing it. But I feel like the R rating, number one, the smoking, like the kids specifically smoking.
The kids smoking, yes.
I also read that they made Rob Reiner have the kids swear more than was originally in the script because they thought no one would go see a Stephen King movie that was rated PG-13. Like they wanted an R rating because they wanted people to like think it was going to be some crazy Stephen King story.
Well, if that's the case, why'd they switch the name from The Body to Stand By Me? They just like, that was the least offensive title they can think of because they thought The Body wouldn't bring people into the seats.
Right. It seemed like they felt the body would indicate something sexual or
Ah.
something more gory than what it was,
Mm-hmm.
which I think they were probably worried about people leaving the theater being disappointed if they expected like a horror movie with a title like The Body, which I can kind of understand. Ironically, I feel like if they had gotten that original director, that would have been more up his alley.
It would have been a
um,
whole different movie, I think.
yeah, but they still wanted an R rating because they felt like they wouldn't sell tickets to a PG-13 Stephen King movie.
That's very interesting. This is a very PG-13 story.
Yeah, I can't help feeling like a lot of the pre-production decisions were like all over the place now that we
Mm-hmm.
kind of know the history of how hard it was to get made.
Right.
It's kind of a miracle it all like came together and it's a cohesive story.
You know, it's funny. In previous movies, we've talked about like having PG ratings, and this is before PG-13 was invented, so that's fine. But like, there's some gore and scary parts and danger and swearing, and no, PG is fine. Everyone bring your kids is great. This movie's like, I think clearly, in my opinion, a clear PG-13, and it existed at this point. Like, we're gonna push for that R rating. I don't know.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter either way to me, I suppose. It does seem weird that Jaws is PG and this is R.
I totally agree with you. I would have expected PG-13. I even looked up the rating when I was trying to decide whether or not my son could watch it with me. And I was surprised it was R because
Mm-hmm.
from what I remember, again, like let's not ignore the whole dead body part of this, but it's such a brief thing in terms of it actually being shown. And in terms of swearing, I mean, we let him watch things with swear words. We just, remind him he will get sent home from school if he uses them in school.
Yeah, I
So
don't
like
think
I
they.
personally don't have as much of a problem with that.
Right. Other parents might, which is fine
Mhm.
in their prerogative. But I mean, this they don't really drop any hard f bombs. I don't believe. And you bring up The Body, and we'll jump to the end real quick. But you don't see anything. You see like part of a something from a bush from the train tracks, and there's
Mhm.
no like close up. There's nothing gross.
There's like a close up of his face though, I think. You see his face.
It's like a quick like a snap second though.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I meant to when
I
I said
probably
it wasn't.
sneezed and missed it.
That's what I meant though when I said it's really not that gory because even when they do show the face of the dead body, it's like he just has a bloody nose.
Yeah.
I personally would have expected a bit more damage from someone who got hit by a train, but what do I know?
Hmm. Well, that's in the movie. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah.
We went straight to the end
Yeah,
on
we
this
went
one.
straight to the end. I did like this bit in the beginning though where they all start making plans to go like see this dead body. I felt like I could have been watching any teen movie from any time period.
Yep.
Like tale as old as time. You just tell all your parents you're at each other's houses so you can go do something you shouldn't be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, technology or not, 1950s or not, just relatable.
I mean, I don't know if that'll work today. Are we like microchip now?
You could be, yeah.
Yeah. I do like this scene. I love how, again, it feels like 1959. I don't know how that feels like. I don't know why I say that, but they totally like, I'm already in this time period now. I'm not questioning anything. It feels authentic to me. And I think it's because both Stephen King and our director were 12 during that year.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably had a lot to say about what's going on.
Yeah.
But I like it's Vern that overhears the story about the body and comes to the clubhouse and tells the boys. But then it's the boys that have to convince Vern to do it. It's like, come on, Vern, we're gonna do it. It's like, oh, I don't know. Like, what? You were so stoked about it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I forgot about that Vern's like the holdout at first.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Vern. I did read that when they were making this, the boys did all have to like hang out together for 2 weeks to kind of become friends in real life. And Rob Reiner had a big hand in this, like making them do acting exercises together, and they did all bond. But at the same time, the other three boys decided in this scene to make Vern forget the knock, or when he has to redo the knock constantly for the clubhouse, because they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to get that feeling of him being like ostracized
Yeah.
across, because it's almost like they had become too tight. They wanted Vern's awkwardness and kind of otherness to be displayed there, and they
Yeah, I
came
read
up with
that
this
too.
on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. When I read that, I thought that was pretty clever of these little actors to
Hmm.
do that.
Yeah, definitely. I thought of this too when Teddy always does the two for flinching to Vern, and will punch him in the shoulder twice. There's that one part where Teddy flinches and Vern's like, oh my God, two for flinching. Cause like he finally got Teddy to flinch, but then Teddy just punches Vern anyway.
Right.
And Teddy's like, no, but you flinched. And Teddy's like, yeah, two for flinching.
Mm-hmm.
Like, of course it's still two for Vern.
Yeah, it's never not going to be two for Vern.
Yeah.
I think he was too excited and celebrated prematurely. He didn't get his two in, which when he could have.
Yeah, I really should have just gone for the punch. I had completely forgotten that Denny, who was Gordy's older brother, was played by John Cusack. We get into Gordy feeling very alone at home because his parents are mourning the death of his older brother. I believe he got in a car accident. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
But it kind of sounds like his brother was the golden child, star football player. Apparently, John Cusack was cast because he had just done The Sure Thing, which was also directed by Rob Reiner. That is the movie we couldn't remember earlier. So the two movies under his belt at this point are The Sure Thing and This is Spinal Tap. But yeah, totally forgot that John Cusack was in this at all. I thought it was interesting though, because Gordy, as the older narrator, makes a point that he's been the invisible boy at home ever since his brother died. But I really feel like he always was. The more we
Yeah,
learn about him, that struck me immediately. They're always concerned about what Denny's been up to, who he's dating, his football game, and doesn't Denny even have to bring up the fact that Gordy wrote something?
yeah.
Yeah,
We
and
only see Cusack's character as Denny like through flashbacks when Gordy is kind of at his worst or when he's the most scared and he's reflecting on his big brother Denny. Every time we do see this, though, Denny is almost like more of the supportive father role in Gordy's life. I agree with you. I think that he was the invisible kid before he died.
I feel like they hammer that home too with this scene where Gordy's at the grocery store. I don't know what you call it. I mean, that is
No.
what grocery stores were at the time, right? But
Yeah.
he's in this little shop when they all realize no one's brought food for their hike. And the shop owner is like, oh, you're Denny's brother. And he starts going on and on about what a great kid Denny was and all this stuff. So it's like, it wasn't just his parents either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this kid was totally in his brother's shadow, but yet still managed to have like a really good relationship with his brother despite that.
Yeah. Speaking of tales as old as time, that's always seems to be a case. The big brother or sister syndrome.
But speaking of all this, there's this scene where Gordy and Denny's dad, in the present, Denny is gone. Gordy is, telling his parents he's going to go hang out with his friends or sleep over one of their houses, whatever. And his dad says, why can't you have friends like Denny's? And I don't know. I don't know if it's the delivery of the line. It felt so heavy handed to me,
Mm-hmm.
or just that we had to really hammer everything home that he really compares literally everything to his older brother, right down to like the kids he hangs out with.
Right. I mean, we already kind of know that these four are, they've got their own problems, right? And they're
Mhm.
not going to be star quarterback. But yeah, it did feel like an after school special, like instead of going to find a body, which I guess is maybe not the most ideal thing for 12-year-olds to do. But it just seems like the next scene, if this was the after school special, like Gordy and his bad friends just like doing a bunch of drugs or something. Like it just seems so, like you said, heavy handed. Why couldn't you have friends like Denny's? Why'd you have to go keep gambling, Art? Like,
That all being said, I am so heartbroken when those older boys steal Gordy's hat that his brother had given to him, like a Yankees
mhm.
hat. And he never gets it back either. And I don't know. I realize there are bigger issues, I guess, in this movie, but I just felt so bad for him. And also made me think of Boys in the Hood, where there's a group of older boys that takes Ricky's football that his
Yeah.
dad left for him.
Yeah.
Or it was his dad's football, one way or the other. But that got me thinking about all the connections with Boys in the Hood. Like, obviously, both are coming of age movies about a group of young boys that, you know, kind of grow up together. Both involve them going to see a dead body. Obviously,
Right.
the circumstances and the implications are very different in either setting. But also at the end, when Gordy's telling us what happened to all the boys in Stand By Me, the character of Chris fades away and disappears as he's walking away. Same thing happens with Doughboy and Boys in the Hood. I ended up looking into this because I was like, this can't be coincidental, like especially when I thought about both of those characters fading away like that. John Singleton did say that Stand By Me was the last movie he saw before going off to college, which for him was like film school, and it just affected him emotionally. His quote is, "I loved everything Stephen King wrote. It was a very emotional coming of age young male story, and I love it on the merits of that." He apparently didn't mean any compare and contrast between like the boys and the situations in either movie. He just said it was young men going through things in various cultures.
Yeah. I think I brought this up a little bit when we did Boys in the Hood because of how much I watched this movie and how little I've seen Boys in the Hood. And it's like, oh, wow, I forgot. There's a lot of similarities, and clearly he took some inspiration. You're talking about the Yankees hat, and I remember Kiefer Sutherland is in this movie, but I forgot what he looked like at that age. And he comes out of the shop and he grabs the hat for the first time, and I'm like, oh, he's kind of bleach blonde. And the only thing I can think of is this right before Lost Boys? Is this like his pre-Lost Boys haircut?
Maybe, because I think I have in my notes that Corey Feldman went on to be in Lost Boys after this. So, right. Yeah, so not too far after.
Not too far after, huh?
I kind of forget about younger Kiefer Sutherland a lot. I don't know why. I just think of him as, he was in 24, right? That was him in the show 24.
I think so. I think you're right. I've never watched that show.
I think of these actors as whatever they were known for when I was growing up, whether I watched that show or that movie or not. And I just sometimes I'll put this on, or like Lost Boys or whatever, and you're like, oh, Kiefer Sutherland as a very young man. Okay.
Yeah. This is my Kiefer Sutherland, like this era, the 80s. I don't think I got much into him later on. I didn't watch his shows, or I can think of just 80s Kiefer. That's all I got.
I feel like for me, this is like how I always think of Richard Dreyfuss as being in Mr. Holland's Opus, and then I see him as younger Richard Dreyfuss in like this or Jaws, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Like, you'd never existed as a young person before. You're just that older actor that my parents know about.
Wow.
In addition to, you know, Gordy's hat getting taken, there's this little bit where Chris shows Gordy that he had brought, I want to say it's his dad's gun.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay. I don't know. It was jarring to me to see these really young boys very much playing with this gun. They're not using it properly. They're not thinking about being safe with it. They're truly just fooling around with this. And, you know, it accidentally goes off at one point. Again, 1959, we see these kids smoking. They casually handle a gun, whatever. Things were different. I don't know if you could get away with that today. I really feel like it's just a sign of the time where I grew up. I see kids with guns and I think of school shootings. I think of Columbine, and it's jarring to me, especially as, you know, someone who's almost 40, seeing like these young kids be really nonchalant with a gun.
I mean, I see your point in a way. I feel like there's different situations, and I do think they were a little careless. He doesn't go off on accident. He shoots a garbage can because he was like aiming at it and he's just like kind of inspecting the gun, and he was told it was not loaded. So obviously you should probably check. There's always one in the chamber.
Right, yes.
That being said, I feel like it was smart. They brought a gun going through like was ever 20-mile, 30-mile walk through the woods by
Mm-hmm.
themselves as 12-year-old boys, like just animals alone you might need to fend yourself from. So I get why it's there.
No, I can appreciate the situations they thought they might end up needing it for.
Right.
It's just kids with a gun hits different with the life experiences I have had that weren't really a thing when this movie came out.
Right. Or when the takes place.
Yeah, either.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. But yeah, they decided to be smart and take the train tracks all the way through. This is kind of like the path of least resistance. They know they can follow it, not get lost, which is also smart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I do like that we get a little foreshadowing of one of their more famous scenes from this movie in bits and pieces, like with Teddy trying to dodge the train, and everyone's like, they literally have to pry him off the tracks and yell at him because he wanted to basically stand there as long as possible and then jump out of the way the last second, because Teddy is a little they call him nuts and crazy, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever word you want to call it there, he is a brash and brazen and kind of brave one, I guess, because who else would want to stand in front of a train? I couldn't help think about Wayne's World when they're arguing. The train's going by, they just pulled Teddy off, and Teddy's like giving them the business because he wanted to do what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't hear their argument. And it just made me think of when Wayne and Garth finally fight in Wayne's World with the planes flying overhead. You can't hear what they're saying. And then at the end, you just hear like Teddy swearing at them all and stomping away.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think about that. But I really like how they shoot this argument between them as the train's going by. The camera's on the other side of the train, so you only see the boys in flashes when there's, space to see them between train cars. And it's a really nice scene. But I also like how at first you really are wondering what is wrong with Teddy. Why is he dodging a train? Why does he think this is something he wants to do? And I like how we slowly peel back the layers of, we already heard his dad's abusive, but then we find out his dad he served in World War II, and he apparently fought at Normandy, and we could maybe assume some of his mental issues stem from being at war and maybe a PTSD kind of thing, because we do later find out his dad's been committed. I guess that's what they did back then. You go to the insane asylum.
I mean, I guess something had to be done after he put his son's ear to a stovetop. I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think there was much in the way of mental health care back then.
Oh, no, of course not.
But you see these layers forming where we slowly get this better understanding of Teddy and also his dad in a sense, because the tragedy of it is that it seems like maybe his dad is only abusive because he has untreated mental issues that if this was a different time period, maybe none of this would exist. Or if his dad hadn't been alive at a time where he had to go serve in a war, it wouldn't exist. This brings us back to that point that we mentioned, like Gordy's confused about why Teddy still seems to be very proud of his dad. He still wants to think of his dad as the war hero that stormed the beaches of Normandy.
Right.
And same thing, the glimpses we get of that start with Teddy just playing war, pretending he's a soldier, right? And then it all comes out that this is because of his dad. I do like how layered this ends up being, how complicated this ends up being, instead of strictly Teddy's dad sucks or whatever.
Right, yeah. Oh, Teddy's dad hit him, so he's a horrible person. But yeah, no, I do like the layers because you got to get that with Teddy too to get that for his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because if, to kind of use your terms here, if it was a different time, Teddy would probably be on some sort of ADH or whatever medicine and probably wouldn't be running around pretending he's a soldier and jumping in front of trains.
Sure.
So that would already be treated differently. And then that maybe some of those other issues he has might have been prevented, like you said, if his father was handled correctly. You also see that Chris is kind of the protector. He kind of falls into a little bit like of a big brother, even though they're all the same age. But he's, the encourager, the protector. the sensible one. He seems to always have a good head on his shoulders for the most part, I would say.
Yeah, I was struck by that too at the end of this scene where, they're obviously fighting, they're really going at each other, and then eventually Chris calms down and just says, like, give me some skin, like, give me a high five, like, we're cool.
Yeah.
And that does seem like a maturity beyond his years, but also a maturity that the other three seem to lack.
For right now, yes, I would
Mhm.
agree.
And because even Chris can see what's really going on with Gordy's dad and the way they treat Gordy,
Yep.
more so almost than Gordy can.
I would say quite literally, because I think that's a conversation they have. Or maybe he forces Gordy to admit it. Maybe Gordy's been ignoring it.
Maybe. I was struck by that dialogue where Gordy's just sobbing at one point saying his dad hates him and that,
Mm-hmm.
his parents feel like he should have been the one to die, not Denny. And Chris says, your dad doesn't hate you. He just doesn't know you, or he
Right.
doesn't know who you are. And that's so profound for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, he seems to be almost like the adult.
Yeah. I did see an internet theory about Chris that for some reason a lot of people believe he was held back at least 1 year in school, so he might actually be a little older than the other boys. Something about the way that he talks about his family being seen as like a crappy family, like he's never going to amount to anything because of the family he comes from. Something about that alluding to him being held back in school, but I did not get that impression personally.
I didn't get that impression either. And even if he was held back a year, it's not that big of a difference. I don't think he's gonna
Not when you're that
1 year
age.
later he's gonna like just all of a sudden be profound. Like, oh,
Yeah,
my birthday, I'm smarter now.
he
Doo-doo.
he was held back, but like took a philosophy course.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna make up for these credits, I think.
Right. Although speaking of that too, it struck me that there's a part where Chris and Gordy talk about how Gordy's going to go on to do like these college credit courses in junior high, and none of the other boys got into those. And the way Chris says it, like they would never let me take college courses or college credit,
Yeah,
college prep. Is that what I'm trying to think about?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. It's striking to me that we are at a time now where college was, seen as more optional, not seen as something everyone did. Whereas, at least when we were growing up, I felt like it was just a given. You go to middle school, you go to high school, you go to college. That's
That's the progression of life.
right. There was no question whether you were on, college prep courses or not in school. It's like you couldn't get, feel like it was really hammered in, like you will never get a job if you don't go to college.
Oh, it definitely was.
Yeah, so the difference in that, first of all, just also the way he words this, that he's not allowed to take certain classes, that struck me. I don't know. I guess I don't remember how it worked when we were in school, if you had to be invited to take honors classes or whatever, but
The way I remember it is your grades had to dictate it. So if you had, if you were in let's call it just a regular class, and you had, like, you got A's all the time easily enough, they'd put you in honors or AP because you weren't being challenged. It doesn't seem like Chris gets good grades. Or maybe because his reputation, he's not taken seriously in class. But in this conversation, though, Gordy says he doesn't want to take these classes because he wants to be with his friends, and Chris lays into him and basically calls him a dumbass for thinking that, and he can still be friends with us, and don't let us hold you down. And I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, but also this conversation and like already seeing the difference in the boys' background and their home lives, it struck me too how much your grades can also be a reflection of just your home life and what else you have going on. Because do you think Teddy has time to study a lot when his dad's like beating him up?
No.
You know what I mean? So it's so, I guess, the waste of potential to me that Chris is written off the way he is, apparently for who his family is. I feel like we never get a solid handle on what is so bad about his family. I could be wrong about that. We learn a lot about Teddy.
They don't go into details. We just get a bit through Chris, but he just, I guess, comes from a bad lineage. They're all troublemakers. They keep in mind, like, I think it goes more into it in the story, but Castle Rock, whichever state you want to put it in, it's supposed to be like a like a milling town, and it's, unless you're a Gordy or maybe like a superstar quarterback like Denny was, you're probably going to get a job at the mill after high school. And that's kind of the expectation.
Oh, okay.
Versus getting good grades and leaving Castle Rock and going away forever and being successful.
Okay.
In some of the flashbacks, which, you know, we see Denny and his relationship with Gordy and why Gordy loves him so much, because it seems like he's the only one in the house that cared about him at all, and definitely supported his writing. You know, encourage him to write more. He'd try to get his parents to listen to his stories or read his stories. There's one scene where they're swooning over Denny and his football career and is potentially going to be scouts or whatever. I don't know. They're just Denny. Took a pause and like, why does that mom look so familiar? It is the same actress who is the mom in Gremlins. And if I've seen any movie a bajillion times, man, I never made that connection because you just see her so briefly in this movie.
Yeah.
It's like two flashbacks, and one of them she's like gardening or hanging laundry, so I don't even think her face is seen.
Yeah, you barely see her face.
And then apparently she was also in Back to the Future, and I don't remember her from that, but do love me that Back to the Future movie as well.
Man, I haven't seen Back to the Future in a really long time. I wouldn't have recognized her from that. It's been too long. Gremlins is a Christmas movie over here, so
same. Real quick before we move away from like the boys, specifically Teddy, I did want to point out, I don't know if I've seen a lot of Corey Feldman movies besides like probably the big ones in the 80s that he's known for, but rewatching it this time, might be my favorite Corey Feldman, and I feel like, you know, maybe Rob Reiner was right, and there's a lot of stuff he took from his personal life and put it into this role, but he's just so emotional on either end of the spectrum. He like bounces back and forth, but it's so raw. It feels so real. I think he kind of steals the show. Sometimes he's a little overacting maybe, but he's also 12. And it's also Corey Feldman. He's kind of known for being a big character. But like anytime he's in the scene, it's just like, what's he going to do? And I'm like kind of excited to see like which Teddy we're going to get. And I think Feldman did a really good job with that. Meanwhile, though, while this is all going on, we kind of forgot to mention, or maybe we did briefly, that the whole reason they know about this body is Vern hears about it from his older brother and some other, you know, friend of his older brother. They're in a gang with Bad Boy Ace Merrill. So there's like a older group of kids. They're in some sort of like stupid little local gang that they're in. And I guess they boosted
like a gang in Greece.
Yeah, they definitely, I mean, at one point they're scratching whatever their name is of the gang into each other's arms, as you do.
Carving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Greece was a little darker.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
But so that's how he overhears about him. And those two boys keep it a secret because they don't want to get in trouble for stealing a car. I forget how they know about this body exactly, but they were in that area where he went missing, the boy.
I think they drove the stolen car out to that area or something.
They either drove it out there or they stole it from there. I can't remember which one. But eventually, these two chuckleheads can't keep a secret, and they have to tell the other members of the gang, and then they collectively go to the leader, Ace. And they were afraid because they didn't want to get in trouble for stealing a car, right? Well, Ace is like, no, we're going to go find that body, and we're going to be the heroes. So like almost kind of the same plot point with the other four kids. For some reason, if you find a body in 1959, you become a living legend, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my only thought is it was probably easier to disappear at that time. You do see, we hear a bulletin on the radio saying they're still looking for him.
Right.
He's supposed to be their age, isn't he? Like
yes,
he's supposed to be a young boy. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like if a 12-year-old went missing now, like you'd have people like organizing searches and helicopters flying around and all this stuff. And obviously there's more that you can track with cell phones. You mentioned us all being microchipped. I just feel like especially the lack of technology, they're in this more rural area. It probably would have been a lot harder to find someone.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I don't feel like this guy looked 12 when they found him.
Yeah. I feel like it was in between their ages, like the group of boys.
I would have said, if anything, he was like Ace's age. I just thought he definitely looked older than the group of
Right.
younger boys. And I had to remind, that's why I was asking you, like, isn't he supposed to be 12? Because he did not look.
As far as I remember, yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of weird that both of these groups of boys are like, yeah, we'll find this body and we'll be famous.
Yeah. I mean, I get it because you're putting a lot of people at ease instead of this boy just being missing. No one wants their kid to be found that way, but it's also a little bit better to know than, I guess, worry for the rest of your life, I suppose. And the older boys know because that's where they were. And this is where, like, kind of Teddy comes into play, because they ask him, like, oh, you know that road by that river, right? He's like, yeah, for whatever reason. Oh, his old man used to take him fishing there, is what he said. Again, more layers with Teddy and his dad. You know, when he defends his dad, he probably focuses more on all those memories, obviously.
Right.
So they use Teddy as their GPS, so to speak, and the boys know it vaguely because they were just there. They cheat and they drive, or the boys have to, you know, hoof it on a train track, and then they have to cross this giant trestle over the river, and we get the very famous, I guess you can call it, train dodging scene.
Yeah.
Only unfortunately for Teddy, it wasn't him that got to do it. It was poor, slow, scared Vern, and even poor Gordy stuck behind him.
Gosh, yeah. I was yelling at my screen that Vern wasn't moving fast enough, even before the train made itself known. But I love all the foreshadowing we have with this. Like you said, in the very beginning of their journey, Teddy tries to dodge a train. So there's that. Vern is so scared that he's like crawling on his hands and knees, and he had a comb in his shirt pocket because, you know, if they get famous and the news comes and takes their picture, he wanted a comb. And
yeah,
he ends up dropping the comb and, you know, watching it fall all the way down into the river below. But it's shot from above, and it's such a horror movie shot of his face, like in between the railroad slats, and like just its facial expression. The tension building is very good.
Yeah, those two shots back to back, I don't know, maybe Vertigo or something else, Hitchcock, but the comb drops through his pocket, and then it's under the bridge looking up, and then we see the comb falling, and I couldn't help but think of Hitchcock.
I could see that for sure.
But yeah, tension for sure. The whole scene, like goosebumps, nail biting. You know right away there's going to be a train because of all the setup they did. And if you didn't pay attention to all that, and the fact that they're looking for a boy that got hit by a train, supposedly, we just see him like, okay, what if a train comes? Well, whatever. I'm not walking around. This is, you know, Teddy, of course. I'm just going to walk over it. And then it cuts to them crossing it. But right away when you see Vern, he's literally crawling. You're like, oh, dear God, the train's going to come and run him over. Like, you just know because he's just taking his sweet-ass time, and poor Gordy's stuck behind him.
Yeah.
Maybe just to make sure he's okay. And encouragement, I don't know.
That was a little surprising to me, too. But, you know, gotta up the stakes.
Right.
I did read that the way they shot this scene, they had stunt doubles that were women who had cut their hair really short, like short women who had cut their hair short. But also for the close-ups, because the train was actually so far away from them, the boys weren't scared enough. So Rob Reiner came in and yelled at them for not doing a good enough job, and like yelled bad enough to make them cry. And so that's why they ended up looking scared enough of the train. I'd like to think that, because the train really was there, it was just further away than what we see. They used some forced perspective to make it look like it was right behind them. I'd like to think I would still be pretty scared. You're still pretty high up. There still is a train. Like, I still wouldn't be super comfortable.
I feel like I doubt the kids were very high up. I think the females with short haircuts might have, the stunt actors might have actually been on the trestle, and the boys might have been at the ends Or maybe it's a different shot entirely and they're on a trestle, but it's like 2 feet and not 50.
Sure.
But yeah, it did look really cool. I do like how they, they shot it for real. The train is actually there. It's like with this super long telephoto lens, and they compressed it to make the train look as close behind them as possible, which is pretty cool. I think today would have been maybe a green screen or something.
Probably, yeah. Well, Jurassic Park invented CGI, so could just use that.
Well, Rob probably called his good friend Steven, and they probably figured it out together.
Okay, I'm gonna bring us to the lardass scene.
Bring us.
I don't know this. Okay, I do kind of appreciate, showing Gordy as a storyteller, because obviously he wants to be a writer. I completely appreciate that this is the kind of story a 12-year-old boy would probably come up with like all the vomiting.
Absolutely.
But like, man, I didn't need to see it.
I remember the story he tells from the movie, obviously, but also from the story. And I was like, is it going to be like as gross as I thought? And it was graphic, but I don't think it was that gross. I was thinking of a different movie. I can't remember what it is right now, where there's something similar happening. And it was more like, it was very gross. This is just like kind of cartoon gross. Everything is like clearly like
it's
a
very
spout.
Cartoony.
Yeah, it's very purple water.
Slapstick kind of.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's not exactly ungross. Everyone gets sick in everyone else's faces, which kind of adds to me the comic book comedy to it, I guess. Especially at the very end when like the choir of ladies get sick on the old men, the antelopes or whatever, the Legion of Antelopes or whatever the hell they were called. They just throw up on their hats.
Yeah. My favorite is when they're like, one lady even threw up in her purse, and it's like the least amount of barf out of anyone. And also like, thank you for the sound effect. But also compared to barfing on like another person, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
She barfed in her purse. Like, do you know how many times when I was pregnant, I thought I would have to go barf in my purse because I was in public?
Right.
Like,
yeah. I feel like she should be awarded and applaud. Everyone else just like turns to their neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone else turns to their neighbor to barf.
Make the situation better. Excuse me, sir. Like, we might have got ahead of ourselves here. So the story Gordy is telling is about, I forget his first name, but Lardass Hogan.
Sure.
That's what they call him, Lardass, in the story, within the story, within the movie. So this very large fellow gets made fun of a lot, obviously, because his name is Lardass, but he gets revenge by entering a pie eating contest, and before that eats a raw egg and an entire bottle of castor oil, which in my notes I feel like, wouldn't he just get sick right away, like right there? I don't think I've ever downed an entire bottle of castor oil, or any at all, because post 60s you didn't drink this stuff to make yourself sick. Yeah, I thought that was kind of odd that he drank all that, and he just gets revenge on the town by getting everybody sick because he makes himself sick, and that's what we're talking about. I didn't know if anyone has not seen the movie, like, why are they just throwing up blue all of a sudden? It's a pie eating contest, by the way. A pie eating contest. Yeah,
it's a blueberry pie eating contest. Yeah, in general, food contests like this make me so grossed out.
Yes, agreed.
For me, it's really the way that they like watered down their hot dog buns in the hot dog eating contest.
I don't want to talk about it. Nope, it's gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I want to be like Lardass and just all over the podcast. And then you
know who would love this scene though is my kid.
Yeah.
Whenever I let him watch this movie.
Yeah. That's why it's rated R. It's the amount of projectile vomiting.
Sure.
Rachel's like, I have no way to get out of this conversation now.
I don't know. It's so gross. I do like the bit though. The way that Gordy ends the story is just kind of like Lardass got his revenge and he just like, sat back and watched it or whatever. And Teddy is arguing that that's not a good ending because he's like, well, then what happens? Well, then what happens? And I like this kind of juxtaposition between Gordy trying to create something that he thinks is good and Teddy making it into more of maybe a populist kind of piece instead of something you could claim was a good ending or a good way to end it versus something that would be satisfying to an average person.
Right. Yeah. It's hard not to think that a lot of Stephen King's fan base often says that about his stories and novels, particularly. I don't fully get that myself. Like, I think things end the way things end for whatever reason, and I'm usually pretty content with that. I particularly like his shorter stories because there's really no beginning or end. Sometimes they're literally 5 pages of just terror, and you're like, oh my god, thank god that's over. And that's what I kind of like about the short stories, and to that effect a little bit bigger in the novellas, is you're kind of getting more of a snapshot, and you're not building a world here. You're getting 5 to 100 and something pages, whatever the limitation of novellas are, to tell this story. And we get more back stuff with the kids through the story, but sometimes we don't even get that. It just, you're thrown in the middle of it. We don't know how it started, we don't know how it's going to end, but the writing is so good that I don't care. I just want to see this snapshot. But it is funny because people often complain about Stephen King's great till you get to the last page.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I never thought that, but that's just me.
Gordy is apparently Stephen King, so So after they tell the story, the boys are camping out. They go to sleep. They decide that one of them should be on patrol because they're hearing coyotes, and they convince poor Vern it's the dead kid's ghost. Yeah. It's so obviously a coyote.
This is like the only bit of like quote unquote horror, I think, is this scene. They're all by the campfire, and it does sound a little scary, ghost or not. It sounds, and they're all like, they're kids in the middle of the woods. They're terrified. There's a little bit of horror element.
Yeah, animal sounds can be surprisingly terrifying as someone who camped a lot with her Girl Scout troop. Also, just even in my own backyard, like I've had dogs who have caught rabbits before, and as my mother-in-law was walking our dog with us once when our dog caught a rabbit, and she came back into our house with this completely haunted look on her face, and she was like, I will never unhear that.
Oh god, yeah.
Rabbit screams are chilling. Also, growing up, some cats got into a fight outside like my open bedroom window at night. That was pretty scary. So yeah, I can appreciate that it's a perfectly reasonable living thing, yet sounds horrible. But they end up deciding someone should be on patrol with the gun. Totally understand why they all don't really feel safe with Teddy being on patrol because he's playing his like army games again.
That he doesn't shut the fuck up. Yeah. So like they're trying to sleep. He's literally talking to himself, narrating his, I don't know, fantasy in his brain. He's like, this is Teddy. I'm leaning against a tree. I hear a noise. I'm going to march out and do this. And like, shut up. Yeah. We're supposed to take turns sleeping, right. not letting us sleep.
But then I love like Vern is up next and he's aiming the gun immediately. Like every time he hears a noise.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really funny, especially because of how quick he is. Whereas I don't think we ever see him like move quickly any other time.
No, not even when a train's running him down.
Right. But then also, again, struck me that I don't think this sort of thing with this young boy playing with a gun would have been played for laughs now. I just feel like the connotation is different. It probably would have seemed so much more innocent if you were watching this like back in the 80s or 90s.
We talked about Chris not getting into classes, but we didn't talk about why he's known as a bad kid, is the whole milk money thing. Because even at one point, during the flashbacks, like you mentioned, the dad in his after school special, like, your friends aren't as good as Denny's. There was something about, I think in that same scene too, I think he calls Chris specifically out and calls him a thief. And so we, the audience, is led to believe like, okay, maybe he is a bad seed, like his brother and father and all that stuff. I bring that up because next on patrol is Chris, and he's just hanging out, and he sees Gordy having a bad dream. Gordy eventually wakes up, and it's not quite his turn yet to take over, but he's awake, and they're having a conversation about, how Chris is, and Chris brings it up. Chris says that, he's no good. He never be any good like, he's wanted to be. And he was upset that they accused him of stealing the milk money. No one asked him if he took it or not. So Gordy asked him, like, did you take it? He goes, yeah, I took it. Maybe I did. Maybe I tried to give it back. And maybe teacher so-and-so, whatever her name is, maybe she pocketed, and the next day she walked in with that new dress on that everyone was talking about. And Gordy remembers the dress.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, maybe there was an instance where a 12-year-old boy wanted to take some money, especially, you get the feeling that he's from, a not well-off family also.
Sure,
so
yeah.
I'm sure it was very tempting for him. But then he had a change of heart. He wants to break the cycle. And it was easy for the teacher to apparently pocket the money and blame the kid who is known to be a brat than the other way around. He even brings it up, like, if it was one of those other douchebags, when he mentions some other names of other families we don't know of, but he says, like, if it was them, I guarantee you they would go off scot-free and no one's going to steal from those kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really liked that conversation. I liked the openness Chris finally has, because he's usually kind of like prodding the other boys to kind of be more open. And he's, like I said, he's kind of the protector. And this is his little moment of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that scene.
That's all I have for the milk money scene. I just really thought, like I said with Corey Feldman earlier, I kind of feel that way in the same scene, or I kind of feel that way also in this scene with River Phoenix. It's like, there's some raw emotion there, and it was really nice and heartbreaking at the same time.
Yeah, for sure.
So on Gordy's watch, there's this like moment he has with this deer, and it's like he mentions it as an older person, the writer who's narrating, that like it's the one thing he didn't tell his friends about. This is the first time he's telling anybody. I feel like that probably could have maybe not happened in the movie, but I feel like in the book, from what I remember, it had a more significant role. I think he talked about it a few more times, but I could be misremembering. It's been a while since I've read it. But I was watching this with my wife, who's never seen it, and when they're all kind of waking up as the train goes by, wakes them up, she said something like, they're kind of just like the hobbits leaving the Shire for the first time. I had to pause to laugh. It was like, that. Yeah. And then I started making like parallels of who's who and like why they would do these things. And I thought it was silly, but it definitely felt like, yeah, they left Castle Rock for the first time on their own, like Frodo and company.
Yeah, that's funny.
The older boys could be the ring wraiths. Anyway, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole.
This brings us to the scene where they decide to go off the railroad tracks and they're crossing through this pond to get to the river.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was really funny. The pond was apparently man-made because, they felt like if they did that, they could control what was in it instead of having the boys go through a real pond with whatever wildlife would be in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The crew kept assuring the kids that everything was fine. Like they made it, they dug it themselves, they filled it with water themselves, whatever. But they built the pond right at the beginning of filming, and they didn't get to filming that scene until about 6 weeks later. So at that point, it had just become part of nature, and like it really was like dirty, and you didn't know what was in it, and there were bugs and leaves and whatever else. Corey Feldman told this story in an interview I read that, it just became one with the forest at that point.
Right.
But all of them did say, Corey Feldman and Will Wheaton, who were interviewed, they would go to this nearby water park a lot when they were done for the day or had time off filming. And the day they shot the leech scene, the leeches were fake. They were not real. Apparently it's like an urban legend they were real. But they had like red makeup on their skin that hadn't worn off yet from doing that scene. And the water park employees wouldn't let them in because they thought they all had like some like rash or something with open lesions, and they're like, you cannot come play in the water park.
For young lepers.
Yeah, right. So after this pond scene, we're basically at the point where the younger boys find the body, and we've mentioned already, at least to me, this kid does not look like a 12-year-old. He looks a lot older. I kind of feel like it looks scarier when they first find the body and it's just like his feet and lower legs sticking out of the brush.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm glad the close-up of his face is not so gruesome, like for me personally, but it's still, I don't know. All I can think of is he looks pretty good for someone that got hit by a train.
Yeah, I don't know how official that was, too. I think the boys said that. I think that might be a presumption.
Okay.
Because he was by the tracks. I can't fully remember. They were talking about it in the clubhouse. Who knows what
Okay.
happened to him?
Yeah, I feel like the story they keep telling is that he went out to pick blueberries and never came back.
Mm-hmm.
But, and apparently, maybe according to the two older boys who first found the body, they thought he was hit by a train. Eventually, this brings us to a standoff between the younger boys and the older boys, because, like you said, the older boys are on their way to find the body too, but they're driving, they get there faster. Ace, I think that's Kiefer Sutherland's character.
Yep.
He pulls a knife on like Gordy and Chris. I feel like the other two have run away or something at this point.
Gordy isn't really in the shot for whatever reason. Vern takes off right away when the older boys show up. You see
he's scared of his brother too.
Yeah, he like runs off the other side of the embankment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not until Ace pulls a knife that Teddy, who was standing tall for a moment, even though it was like 6 versus 3, maybe 2, because we don't see Gordy's off screen right now. But then he pulls a knife, and that's when Teddy bails, and rightfully so. And he seems to be like he'll take a beating from 3 older boys, but maybe the knife is a little too real.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen enough to realize that Ace doesn't really back down from anything.
No, he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. Well, Vern's older brother is part of this gang. I don't know if there are any other literal relations, but
I feel like Chris's older brother was in there too, but I might be making that up or making assumptions.
Another one. Yeah, I kind of thought so too. But if I remember correctly, they're like, well, wait, you're not actually going to like kill my little brother, right? Because kind of
right.
go that
so
far.
That would have been Chris's brother then, yeah.
I think so. I don't know. But anyway, my point being, basically, Ace is threatening at least Chris with a knife. Gordy kind of pops up with the gun that at least I had forgotten about at this point, and really goes toe-to-toe with Ace, like gets him to back down. Apparently in the book it's Chris with the gun.
Yep.
Okay. And they changed it to Gordy since, like you had mentioned at the beginning of the episode, they changed the whole screenplay to kind of be more about Gordy's journey. I did think it was interesting that, Ace promises that this isn't the end of it. Like, they back away and they leave, but they're like, we're still going to get you for this. And I'm surprised that you just don't hear anything about that again. I can understand it might not have fit in with the pacing of the movie.
Yeah.
But I really expected the older boys to be like waiting for them when they got back into town at least.
They in fact were. They all actually get their ass beat one at a time from these older boys in the story. Yeah, they get beat up pretty good.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were right.
Well, maybe I don't want to read this book. I don't know.
It's not that bad. No one dies, at least in those situations. They just get beat up by some older boys. It's like, I think it's like a 2-on-1 every, like, I think they split up and kind of get them when they're alone, and I don't know. There's a line Gordy gives when he has the gun and he aims it at Ace. It didn't sound like a 12-year-old boy would say it. It sounds like, I want to say, like a black and white movie from the 30s. I don't know, but he shoots the gun up as a warning. He aims at Ace, and Ace is like, "You can't kill all of us." He's like, "I'm just going to kill you," and then cocks the trigger guard. And he says, "Suck my fat one, you cheap dime store hood."
Yeah.
And like, I think some of that's believable. Then he gets to cheap dime store hood is like, I mean, I guess Ace is kind of a cheap dime store hood, but it doesn't feel like a 12-year-old would say that. And it just kind of made me laugh a little bit in this moment of tensity.
It's true.
Maybe it's the 12-year-old delivering it. I don't know. It just stuck out to me.
I did like how when Ace is like, well, you're not going to do anything because you can't get all of us. And I do like when Gordy says like, no, I'm just going to kill you. Because like Ace is the one that is the most obnoxious there.
Yeah, you shoot one of them, especially the leader. I don't know if the rest are going to want to stick around.
Really hang out, yeah.
Yeah.
We touched on this already, but the final scene where they all walk back to town and they're saying goodbye one by one, and I think we hear a little bit about what happens to each of them.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, they say Vern got married out of high school and was like working at a factory or something like that. Is that right? Or a forklift operator?
Forklift operator. That sounds right.
But there is a little part when he's walking away that he sees a penny in the road and he's like, oh, look, I found one. And it's a callback to, you know, him having buried a bunch of pennies under his house and he can't figure out where they are again. If you go to Brownsville, Oregon, where they filmed this, that exact intersection where Vern walks away, they have embedded a penny into the road. It's Vern's penny. It's like a tourist attraction in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, apparently.
I guess if I was over there, I'd want to see it, but I don't think I'm going to go there just to see it.
They say goodbye to Teddy next, and I believe his fate is that he tried to get into the army, but couldn't because of his damaged ear, and also his eyesight wasn't very good.
Correct.
And does he end up in and out of jail? Was that it?
Yes. And I think they said in and out of institutions, I think. So maybe either jail or maybe they're alluding he is quote unquote loony as well. But I think they said he doesn't hold a steady job either, something like that.
I was getting confused because I had read that in the book, like one of them dies in a house fire and one of them dies some other way.
Vern dies in a house fire and Teddy is killed in a car crash.
I mean, none of this is really great in either version, to be fair.
No.
But then we get this like little ray of hope when he's explaining what happens to Chris, because Chris ended up taking the college prep courses with him and he ends up going to law school and becoming a lawyer. And you think like, oh my gosh, like good for him. He made it happen and he got out. But no, then it turns out he was killed in a freak accident where two men were fighting at like a deli in front of him and he tried to step in and get him to stop and he got stabbed in the neck. Yep. Died instantly.
He tried to be peacekeeper as always and he suffered for it.
Yep.
Yeah, and we see at the very beginning of the movie the older Gordy reads the headline in the paper and that's what kind of like jogs his memory of his time with Chris, Vern, and Teddy, and he, as the writer, starts putting it down on paper.
Mm-hmm. I did like, though, when you see that headline, it just says something like a lawyer was killed trying to break up a fight. You don't know which of the boys it is yet.
I'm fairly sure it's like Chris Chambers, as Gordy is, talking about Chris's unfortunate fate. And he does the fade away that you had mentioned earlier. He talks about everyone kind of drifted apart. Him and Chris kind of stayed the most in contact, and the other two, they knew each other in high school, but they didn't talk as much. You get the impression they're really good friends here, and they kind of drifted away. And he said that was fine or whatever. But there's a line that I thought really struck me about just how friendships dissolve sometimes. And Gordy says, "Friends come in and out of your life like busboys in a restaurant." And I don't know, it's kind of sad, I guess. You see these four boys and you kind of see like there's a twosome and a twosome, and like a lot of relationships that's like that when you have multiple people, and that's fine. They shared this experience together, and I felt like that would have made them even closer, and apparently they just kind of friendship-wise dissolve like Chris dissolved when you in that shot.
Yeah, this struck me as sad too, because Gordy says it as like eventually Vern and Teddy just became faces he passed in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens, right? You're not friends with every single person you were friends with at this age. It's natural. People grow up and lose touch, but it does feel so devastating when you've just seen them have this adventure together, this bonding experience. And then you mean to tell me that after all that, at least these two were just faces in a crowd to you?
Right.
We cut to a shot of our narrator, who we can assume is Gordy, as an older man.
Yes.
Richard Dreyfuss is older Gordy. I'd like to point out, though, we mentioned that scene at the very beginning where he is sitting in his car looking at the newspaper clipping. That is also supposed to be older Gordy, the writer, the narrator, but it's a different actor.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had an actor named David Duke playing older Gordy, and then they recast him with Richard Dreyfuss, but they didn't reshoot the first scene?
Yeah, I don't understand. So to me, I was watching it this time, and I always remember Richard Dreyfuss as the narrator and at the end. Like, I know what Richard Dreyfuss looks like. And then they don't show him too long in the beginning, but it was long enough for me to go, wow, does Richard Dreyfuss really look like that when he's that young? Like,
right? His
keep
hair
in mind,
was so dark.
Yeah. Keep in mind, we just saw him 10 years earlier last week when we talked about Jaws. So, like, I'm like, it's not Richard Dreyfuss, but I was, like, confused because I don't ever remember there being a second actor. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I find it funny that they, A, left the shot in, or B, didn't reshoot it, or C, just have Mr. Duke to the end scene with the typewriter, and you can still have Dreyfuss narrate it. The physical actor doesn't have to say anything. You can have Dreyfuss just narrate the whole thing and keep the same physical actor. It's weird. I don't know. It
just felt so lazy to me because it's such a quick scene in the beginning. Like, you couldn't just get Richard Dreyfuss to sit in a freaking car and look longingly. Like, I don't know. And apparently this all happened because Rob Reiner kept feeling like no one had the right voice for the narrator. And eventually he settled on Richard Dreyfuss. I think they're friends. And so it was like, call up my friend Richard Dreyfuss and have him be in this movie. I mean, I do like this conclusion that at least Gordy got out, and I feel like we can infer based on like the size of his house that he's a successful writer, has kids, seems to be at least a more involved parent than his own were with him.
Right. Yeah, they come and ask him if they can play. Like, they basically ask if they can play, but they want like the dad to play with them. But he ends his narration with, I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? And I don't know, I feel like, I guess there's two sides of that coin. Mostly, though, on one side, I feel how very true that is. Mm-hmm. And yes, we all grow older and we befriend other people at other stages in our life. But there's something about, at least for me, when you get these like coming of age stories, especially like with Boys in the Hood and Stand By Me, where it's a group of young boys, I can't help but feel that myself. I can't help but look back at my friends from that time period, and there weren't four of us. It seems four is the magic number. There were three of us. Yeah. There was always a fourth, but they never stayed in our triangle, I guess you can call it. But I very much still had best friends with those two other boys from my youth at that age. And it does kind of strike me, that line and the restaurant line was like, well, what happened to your other friends? Well, some of them disappear, but some of them last forever. And in this movie, you get the idea that, him and Chris haven't talked in a while. I think it's mentioned maybe at the end, or maybe in the book, it's like been 10 years, but they still were close. And it's like, yeah, it kind of sucks though, because then like the last time you saw him was 10 years ago, and then you read about him in the paper.
Yeah, it's a good point too, because I think about staying in touch with people that I was friends with when I was young. Like I had a pretty tight-knit group of friends, I would say, when I was around 12. I'm still close friends with quite a few of them. And it's funny because my husband and other people will be like, do you know how rare that is to have like one friend that you still talk to that you've been friends with for that long? Like one of my close friends, I've known her since 5th grade, but I have multiple that I would say I've known since elementary school.
Yeah.
Definitely high school. Yeah, I guess my feeling is, I think it's more so the time period of this age where you're like starting to become independent, but not really. There's not a lot you can truly do on your own, but you're probably old enough to the point where your parents are letting you, like, we would go to the pool on our own, or I don't know, ride bikes to a park or something. It's not like we always had to have an adult with us, but it's obviously we couldn't drive. We were limited on where we could actually go, right?
Right.
But it's that age too where you're still gonna do dumb shit and get into trouble sometimes because you're still just a kid.
Right. Some of us on purpose, some of us on accident, because we make childlike mistakes.
Exactly. But on the other hand, I'm so much beyond 12 at this point, so much older than 12. I've gone through so many life experiences that I feel like have bonded me with various people that maybe in terms of experiences have been more intense than when I was younger, right? Because like people get married and have babies and lose parents and stuff, that's probably been more of a bonding experience with me for certain people, but it's still different because I think when you're the age these boys are, everything feels like a really big thing, even if it's not.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the friends I have after high school are not close or as important. I just think this line means like the friends you have at 12. And this guy, in the story at least, Gordy, he mentioned high school. He already, like, two of them kind of already started fading away.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, who was close with, he didn't really communicate too much in the past 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But this headline of his stabbing kind of brought back all these memories. And it's just like when you're 12, those are the friends that you may or may not have for life. And like it sounds like you and I are lucky enough that we have at least one or two of them. But even if you don't have them for life, those memories at that time, that impressionable age, that kind of, the beginning of your adolescence is so important. Even though if you might never talk to them ever again, everyone Gordy knew died, and then he became successful. And obviously he's reminiscing about that.
I feel like it's almost more heartbreaking, his relationship with Chris, because they stayed friends for so long only to lose touch as adults. It sounds like you had mentioned they hadn't talked for 10 years before Chris died. I can't help feeling like maybe that wouldn't have been the case if it was set more now, because with cell phones and texting and the internet. I did a girls trip years ago with two of my friends, and we ended up at I guess like a food truck park, and it was really crowded, and these guys sat down asking if, they could use the other half of our table that we were sitting at, and we were just talking and mentioned that we've been friends since elementary school, and they were like, "Oh my god, how have you stayed in touch that long?" And we were like, "The internet." And I mean, it's the truth.
Right. Yeah. It's funny though, because we talked about this in another movie, but as they gotten older, like technology did advance. Maybe they didn't have internet on computers in their pockets. Like they could call each other. I mean, landlines existed at least, especially in the 80s.
I guess my thinking though is that when someone passes away, even someone that we maybe haven't talked to in a while, that maybe we were once close with, you wouldn't find out in the newspaper.
Right. Yeah.
And chances are you would have and chances are you would have been friends on some sort of social media. So like you would have probably, even if you didn't talk, you would have known what was like going on in their life, at least surface level.
Which is both nice and annoying, but it's a lot better to kind of keep tabs from afar, and you can see the sad stuff, but also the big celebrations in other people's lives, which is nice. Where I guess to your point, a landline, a phone call away is maybe not going to solve all those problems.
Just some other things I wanted to mention that I learned while doing my research. It sounds like all the boys did get along while they were filming, but Wil Wheaton said in an interview that Corey Feldman really did pick on him a lot and gave him a hard time. He says now that he's an adult and also a dad, he can see that Corey was dealing with a really bad home life and he was very angry. Corey, in the same interview, said that Wil's parents shielded him from a lot on set. They were with him all the time. Whereas Corey and River Phoenix were left to their own devices. We had mentioned earlier they sort of had guardians that their parents left them with, but it sounds like maybe they did not keep a super close eye on them. To this point, I read an interview with Rob Reiner and Corey Feldman where they discussed Corey had his first beer that summer. Corey and River both tried pot for the first time together that summer, and River Phoenix lost his virginity that summer. All while they were filming this movie, they had all these firsts. And I would just like to point out that Rob Reiner is the one who knew that River Phoenix had lost his virginity while they were filming this movie.
I'm assuming somehow River told him for whatever reason. It seems like some of these behind the scene things that Rob and the boys got kind of close. And, he's their director and he's trying to get the most out of them. So he, like the scare tactics on the bridge and etc. are getting them to cry when they don't want to or aren't doing a good enough job.
Everything I read, anytime they talked to the actors that played the four boys, they all said that working with Rob Reiner was like having an acting class on that set. Like they never had a better actor teacher than Rob Reiner, and he working with him made them understand what it means when people say someone is an actor's director, because he
Nice.
really helped them like access emotions they needed for various scenes.
A little fun tidbit I read is when they collect money because no one brought food and they all kind of scrounge to get some food, their combined money was 237, which is the room number in The Shining.
Yeah, I had forgotten that was the room number in The Shining, but I do know that much.
They also briefly mention Shawshank. I think it's when someone asks like where Teddy's dad's at, they assume he's either at Shawshank or the asylum.
Okay.
And I already mentioned what happens with Teddy and Vern.
Oh yeah, how they die in the book.
All right. So after all that, legacy of the film, this was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay and 2 Golden Globes, one for Best Drama Motion Picture and one for Best Directing. Rolling Stone has called Stand By Me, quote, a staple of youthful nostalgia and, quote, the rare movie that necessarily gets better with time. And I feel like watching it now and 10 years ago and 20 years ago, I feel like that's kind of true. I feel like just the more you kind of harp on that, the nostalgia aspect of it, as you get older, it kind of makes the movie better because that's what our main character is doing. So like we're parallel with him, I suppose.
I had seen a really nice quote from Rob Reiner that said basically the great things about movies is that they don't change, but you change. So your experience with the movie changes. And I feel like that's so true of this one.
Yeah. Speaking of Rob Reiner, Stephen King called Stand By Me the best adaptation of his work to date after Reiner screened it for him. He actually had to get up and leave the theater to compose himself afterwards. This is what gets Reiner to end up to direct Misery.
So if I'm remembering correctly, the only adaptations that Stephen King really liked were this one and Shawshank, I think.
Yeah, well, at least at the time.
At the time,
86.
Yeah. It makes me want to read his books to understand what the big problem is with so many of these adaptations, but then also, like, I don't have this much time in my life. So, for all the issues it had getting made, Stand By Me ended up being the sleeper hit of the summer of 1986. Ended up grossing $52 million, which is pretty good if you remember that Mr. Norman Lear put in, $7.5 million to get it made, so they definitely made that back. They didn't have a big premiere or really a lot of fanfare for the release, which I thought was funny, but now that I know this story, and even once they got it made, they didn't have a distributor, it kind of makes sense, because it kind of sounds like no one knew if this movie would even get made and then if it would even come out. There's a story that Jerry O'Connell told in one of his interviews where he went to see it with his grandparents at an afternoon show at a local theater, just like regular people going to the movies, and that was the first time he saw it since there was no premiere. The woman selling the tickets at the front recognized him as one of the boys from the movies. And she was like, wait, weren't you in the movie? And the grandparents said, like, he was, but so are we. We were on set too. And so number one, this gives you an idea too of like how some of them really had a lot of family support and some of them really did not. Secondly, the woman gave them their money back for the tickets because she was like, oh, movie stars don't have to pay, and kind of, played it up. And,
nice.
Which was very sweet. But when Jerry O'Connell tells the story, he said that his grandparents were more excited to have their tickets reimbursed when they told everyone about it later than they were having her realize he was like a movie star. Rob Reiner was in England at this point making The Princess Bride. Basically, when he got back after making that movie, he was suddenly the hotshot director of Stand By Me. Not like he wasn't really known, I think, in the industry, but he was definitely like a hot commodity after this.
Yeah, that led him to start his own production company, Castle Rock Entertainment, which was named after this fake town in Oregon, which is supposed to be in Maine. I'm not going to give that up.
I had heard of Castle Rock before, but I'm not up with the Stephen King lore, so I had no idea this was the connection.
I don't know if I made that connection until like recently.
I did want to get into the careers of the four main boys a little bit. So Will Wheaton, who played Gordy, he went on to be in Star Trek The Next Generation, but it looks like he's done more voice work than anything else throughout the years. He also had a role in Flubber, which I just wanted to point out because like I feel like that was one of my like childhood movies. Like Robin Williams was a big part of our childhood movies.
Yeah, I only can picture him. Him and green stuff. I can't picture anything else from that movie. Like I couldn't recognize Will in that movie now.
Same, yes. Corey Feldman, he had already been in The Gremlins and The Goonies before Stand By Me. He went on to be in The Lost Boys, but eventually stopped acting due to drug and alcohol addiction. I personally remember hearing about him more as I feel like he was on VH1. I don't want to say Behind the Music because that's not correct, but VH1 kind of interview shows where it's like behind the scenes of Hollywood or like Entertainment Tonight kind of things where they would be interviewing these actors that maybe weren't working at the time, but it's like, let's look back at their careers. But he would be talking a lot about like how bad life was as a child actor and how poorly he was treated. And I think there was, abuse and drugs and whatever. And I remember him and Corey Haim always doing these interviews together because they were the Coreys.
They were the Coreys.
Yeah.
They did interviews together and they got in trouble together.
Right. Yes.
And they killed vampires together.
Of course.
I mentioned earlier how I really liked Feldman in this role, and we've kind of touched about possible, bad home life in real life. And Corey had stated in several interviews that this character, of all characters, Teddy, was the closest to his real personality and personal life at the time. So I guess all those emotions I was feeling through Teddy were pretty legit, I suppose.
Yeah, it really does seem that way, that from everything that Rob Reiner said and the boys who are still around, Jerry O'Connell, I feel like he had more success as an adult, particularly in a TV show called Crossing Jordan, which I've heard of. I remember it being on when I was younger, but I never saw it. Looking through his filmography, like I feel like he doesn't really have a hit movie. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember him being in Scream 2. That's really it. But I feel like he was always known. Like I always knew who Jerry O'Connell was.
Yeah, I definitely remember him Scream 2. I was kind of looking through his stuff too. I was like, I don't recognize all this stuff. How do I know him so well? I believe it's a TV show, Sliders. I think that was really big for a while. And I don't remember watching it, but I think it was on a network where I watched a lot of other shows. So we got a lot of ad space for it. I think that's what I remember it from.
But I did come across a story that I thought was really cute. Jerry O'Connell is married to Rebecca Romaine, who the only thing I can think of now is she was in like the X-Men movies.
Mm-hmm.
She was a model. Do you know who I'm talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
So apparently the first time he ever went back to her hometown and was like hanging out with her friends from home, they told him that they were like, Stand By Me was her favorite movie as a kid. Like she had a poster in her room and she would watch that movie over and over and over again. And she had never said anything about this to him. But in her defense, that must be so freaking weird to be like dating someone that you watched all the time growing up. And
yes,
that would probably be, I would feel weird bringing that up to the person. I could appreciate that.
Yeah, because then you're going to feel very fangirlish, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. I would probably keep that in my back pocket.
Yep. River Phoenix, who played Chris, infamously died at the age of 23 of a drug overdose. He collapsed outside the Viper Room in Hollywood, which I'm pretty sure is the club that Johnny Depp owned, if I'm remembering correctly. We've mentioned this already, but I feel like his name loomed larger for me growing up than like anything he actually was in. I know I've heard of My Own Private Idaho, but he was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for Running on Empty. I have not seen either of these.
I don't think I've heard of the second one.
I hadn't either. A lot of the interviews I read with cast and crew, they noted that River Phoenix came from a family of hippies. He was a strict vegetarian. Everything had to be natural. Like, people on the set of Stand By Me would talk about how he wouldn't drink water that might have been treated with anything like fluoride or whatever. And he'd always talk about how like eating meat would kill you, or like this thing that was seemingly fine to other people would really hurt you. And it was just ironic to all of them that he ended up developing such an intense drug addiction, knowing what they knew about him, having spent all this time with him, and, you know, some of his lifestyle quirks. Wil Wheaton in particular mentioned being upset with River Phoenix because, according to him, everyone knew River was the one who would go on to the biggest career, the quote $20 million per movie Tom Hanks sort of career. He just felt like River was throwing everything away, but then at the end he was mad that there was no one there to help him or stop him or like turn him back around. But even Rob Reiner had a quote in one of the interviews where he said that he met up with River Phoenix at some point years later. It was years after Stand By Me, but obviously before he passed away. And he said he was so high and he couldn't understand how he was even still working or why no one was doing anything about this. Like, how does no one see this? And I don't know, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, I guess.
Yeah, at 23 too. That's
so
pretty
young.
bad. I guess it's bad in general, but it seems like he obviously probably had a problem for a while. It probably could have stemmed from like the bad home life we've kind of mentioned before.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Even though his family obviously had these like ideals they lived by, it didn't sound like his parents were necessarily involved in his life. And according to what Corey Feldman said, River Phoenix was on his own once he was on set just as much as Corey Feldman was. Whereas,
right,
you know, Jerry O'Connell was rolling deep with his grandparents. Like,
Grammy's here. Yeah. She brought the pudding pops.
My only other note about the legacy of this movie is that Brownsville, Oregon, where they filmed it, has an annual Stand By Me Day. I don't fully know what they do for that, but I did read, well, we mentioned the penny that they embedded into the street where Vern finds the penny. There is some advertising, like the old-timey advertising they painted on the sides of buildings for the movie. Some of that's still up. I think maybe like one or two. Apparently the movie is huge in Japan and they get a lot of visitors from Japan to come see the movie sites.
Interesting. Huh, wouldn't have guessed.
I looked up the town on Google Maps just out of curiosity. There are a couple like tourist spots that pop up, Penny spot, and then also Gordy's house on the outskirts of town.
Ooh.
But it really is in the middle of nowhere. I think I'm going to get the geography wrong. I want to say maybe Eugene is to the north and Salem's to the south or vice versa, but it's not like they're close. You know, the fictional town being like a mill town, like I could believe that.
Yeah. Castle Rock, Oregon seems a lot like Castle Rock, Maine.
Yeah.
Middle of like two big cities, but like kind of in its own bubble.
I got the impression that this is probably a big boost for the economy to have their annual, this movie was filmed here day.
Roll with what you got.
Look, I'm from Cleveland. I get it.
Yeah, between like changing the state and having two different actors play old Gordy, I'm a little confused on those two decisions. I didn't grow up in 59, but the jokes and language, easy to understand. I still laugh at it. The tense scenes like the trestle with the train still gets me. It's still like, you know, they're going to make it. And every time it's still just barely. And you're like, oh God, they're not going to make it this time, even though I know they do.
I absolutely had that thought too. Yeah.
The standoff with Ace at the end, still tense. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is not one I watch as often as some of the other movies I cherish, but I have watched enough or I remember all these things, but it's nice to revisit. And like I said, it does, for me at least, being at one point a 12-year-old boy with a small group of friends like that, it pulls on the heartstrings. It makes you remember what it was like having friends like that. And luckily I still have some of them.
Mm-hmm.
At least from that age. I still have other goofy friends that I love that I met as an adult, but specifically like my childhood friends.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, this absolutely held up for me. I know I say this a lot, but different experience watching it back as at my old age and also being a parent. This was one that I really can't wait for my son to see and see what he thinks of it, even if that's not for a few years. All I could think of watching it was this, group of kids in the neighborhood that he's always running around with. And he and his friends are only like 3 years younger than these kids, if these kids are 12. And I don't know, they're going to get into trouble and learn some life lessons. And I don't know, it's just, I feel like not exactly looking forward to some of it, but like it's all part of growing up.
Yeah, now you're on the other side of it where like eventually his experiences are going to be your experiences, but just from a different point of view.
Yeah. All right. Well, we would love to hear your thoughts on Stand By Me, as well as your own favorite summer movies. You can find us on Instagram at Back Through the Lens Pod and on Facebook at Back Through the Lens. You can also email us at backthroughthelenspodcast@gmail.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. It's the best way to support our show.
If you enjoyed our show today, please give us a like and follow for updates on new and future episodes. Our show is produced by our host, Rachel Campbell, and myself, Joe Siomick, with additional help and support from Peter Tellep of LPV Productions. Peter, Rachel, and I are also the executive producers. Our awesome logo is brought to you by Tom Faraci, and our wonderful theme song is by Matt Tarek. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more trips into our movie-watching past on Back Through the Lens. Want any pie?
God. I don't want pie for a really long time.